a dramatic face-off in court between former President Trump and the judge who's going to decide the future of his business. The surprise statement from Mr. Trump, what's next in the case, and what it all means for 2024. We've got every angle covered in just a minute. Then, in another courtroom, the president's son, President Biden, that is, as Hunter Biden pleads not guilty to felony tax charges in just the last hour. What our team in the room says it was like, and more on the legal drama that could send Hunter Biden to prison for years. And the start of a new era in the NFL with the Patriots, for the first time since maybe you've been alive, now without Bill Belichick. What's next for him and the team? Plus, why the U.S. Embassy thinks several suspicious deaths in Colombia could be connected to dating apps. And in our backstory tonight, a closer look at day one of a trial in a case that made national headlines. A Connecticut mom missing, never found. Her husband's girlfriend accused of covering up her murder. One of the reporters who's covered this for years has taken us behind the scenes a little later on in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we're coming on the air tonight with the fate of former President Trump's real estate empire about to be in the hands of a judge after Mr. Trump insulted that judge to his face. Part of a surprise closing argument delivered in dramatic fashion by the former president himself. The attorney general who brought the case, she is expected to speak any minute. You see those microphones there. We're going to bring that to you live when it happens. She wants a $370 million fine against Mr. Trump, and she wants him banned from the New York real estate industry for life. Mr. Trump himself, after court, already he's spoken, saying his legal issues are also a political one, making that very clear, linking this civil fraud trial to his push to win back the White House. Watch.
I guess you'd consider it part of the campaign, because if you really look at it, they are doing this. It's never been done like this in this country.
So court has now officially ended. And remember what is in front of the judge as we speak. How Mr. Trump, his oldest sons, and his company should be punished for allegedly overinflating the value of his properties by millions of dollars. Even before the trial started, the judge had ruled there was fraud. So this is now just a question legally of consequences. What will those consequences be? All as we are rounding the corner now to the end of a trial marked by personal attacks and threats against the attorney general, who, again, we're about to hear from, against the judge himself. Threats that even affected court today, with the hearing getting a late start because of a bomb threat at the judge's home, according to a source with direct knowledge of the situation there. Let's get right to NBC's Rahima Ellis, who is live for us outside court in New York. Okay, so it is done for the day. The fate of the former president's real estate empire is in the hands of this judge. What is the message he is leaving with now from both sides as he thinks about how he's going to rule on penalties here?
Well, Hallie, it's been pretty much exactly what we heard during the 3-month-long trial, each side presenting their case and the merits of their case of why they should prevail. Take a look at, we want to give you some of the high points. In terms of what the state was saying, they're saying that there were financial statements a decade worth from 2011 to 2021 that were false. Financial statements false again. Favorable loans provided under false pretenses. As for the Trump team, they're essentially saying there were no witnesses who testified to any fraud being committed, and it was a victimless crime. It's interesting that the judge said that there does not have to be evidence of harm for there to be merit in the prosecution's case. But this whole trial now, after 3 months, has come down to this. The judge saying that he expects that he will have a ruling on this sometime before the end of the month. And at stake, as you pointed out, is the very nature of what propelled Trump into the spotlight in the beginning, and that is his New York State real estate holdings and whether or not he'd be able to continue to do business here. The prosecution is asking for a lifetime ban on him doing real estate in this city, in this state, as well as saying he should pay some $370 million. People on pins and needles trying to figure out what the judge might do, Hallie.
Yeah, no kidding. And just to remind people, as we're looking, Rahima, you're on the right side of our screen. On the left side of our screen, that is the microphone, the set of microphones where we expect to see the New York Attorney General any minute here. We've already heard from Mr. Trump, Rahima, a couple of times outside court. And then, of course, inside the courtroom itself. We thought that wasn't going to happen. Like, if you woke up this morning, you're like, OK, he's not going to be allowed to speak. That obviously changed. Why?
Well, it was a surprise moment. The judge had been very adamant in his ruling yesterday, saying enough is enough. I've given you time to say that you would agree to the parameters of how Mr. Trump would be able to speak here, that it wouldn't be an opportunity for him to make a campaign speech and they couldn't disparage people. But what changed his mind today? Not sure. except for the fact that Trump's people had been saying he should be allowed to make his case. The judge conceded, telling Mr. Trump, stay within the parameters, which I've talked to you about. Well, here's some of what Trump said when he had an opportunity to do so. He said, the legal scholars looking at this case find it disgraceful. This is a fraud on me. Speaking about the Attorney General James, who Letitia brings, who brought this case, he said, the person in the room right here hates Trump. And then to the judge, he said, I know this is boring to you. I know you have your own agenda. They should pay me for what I've gone through, reputation and else. So everything that the judge said he didn't want him to do, he did. People in the courtroom said that Trump was talking in a very rushed and a very fast pace, almost as an effort that he knew the judge would do what he ultimately did, and that was, speaking to the attorney, control your client. And at that point, Trump was taken off of the stand. Hallie?
Yeah. Control your client, he said. Real quick, Rahima, timeline-wise, when could we hear about a ruling in this civil fraud case?
Yeah, people would like it to be sooner than later, but it looks like it's not going to be until the end of the month that we would hear something from the judge on this, bringing to a conclusion an investigation into the Trump real estate holdings that went on for about 3 years and a trial that went on for 3 months. Hallie?
Rahima Ellis, live for us there in New York. Rahima, we're going to ask you to stand by there because, again, when we do hear from the New York Attorney General on the left side of your screen, when she speaks, we're going to bring that to you live when it happens. Don't go anywhere. But for now, we're going to take you to a different courtroom out west in just the last hour in L.A., pleading not guilty to all 9 tax charges that Hunter Biden is facing, including multiple felonies. We should also note, by the way, that here she comes down the steps, the New York Attorney General back in New York. We'll take you back there to listen in.
In our case against Donald Trump for persistent and repeated fraud, illegality. This case has never been about politics or personal vendetta or about name-calling. This case is about the facts and the law. And Mr. Donald Trump violated the law. And as you know, the judge has already found that he, in fact, violated the law for repeated fraud over a period of years. And so I want everyone to know that the personal attacks really don't bother me. The fact is that this trial has shown, and we have produced evidence about the scope, the scale, the depth, the breadth of the illegality, the fraud that impersonally enriched Donald Trump and his family. I want to thank the judge. I want to thank my team. I even want to thank opposing counsel. But at the end of the day, the point is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how rich you are, that no one is above the law, and that the law applies to all of us equally and fairly. I trust that justice will be done, and I'm confident in that. And I'm extremely proud of the case that we put on. Good evening, and thank you.
What's the scope of the damage that you believe is going to come here?
So there you have it. The New York Attorney General, Letitia James, speaking live to reporters there in New York City at the steps of the courthouse, where that civil fraud trial against former President Trump has now wrapped up closing arguments. The fate of his real estate empire is in the hands of the judge that she just referenced, the judge that she thanked, as you heard her thank her team, as well as opposing counsel. And she also said that the personal attacks really don't bother me. And this is after, of course, we saw former President Trump, as we were just talking about a second ago here in this show, go after Letitia James in this sort of surprise closing argument that he delivered in court. I want to bring back in now Rahima Ellis, who's been with us, who's been covering this, who's been watching this. And you heard it there from the New York Attorney General. She believes, she says, that justice will prevail and that this case will prove that nobody's above the law.
Absolutely, Hallie. And the point that former President Trump had been hurling insults at Letitia James today, it's not anything new. He began that when she formally filed this civil fraud case against him. He was saying that it was all a witch hunt, that he was innocent of any kind of allegations that were leveled against him. And she went on to say just a moment ago that this case is about facts and it's about the law. It's not about politics and it's not about name calling, she said. And it's about what she says is that Donald Trump violated the law. She said the judge has already found that he violated the law over repeated years. And she said that it doesn't bother her, as you point out. She says name calling is not something that she finds herself bothered by. We've already shown, she says, the depth of this case, that fraud was committed. And no matter, she said, how powerful, no matter how rich you are, she said no one is above the law. And she trusts that justice will be done in this case. Hallie?
Rahema Ellis live for us there in New York City at the end of a pretty dramatic day. We wait to see what the judge will do. Appreciate it. As we mentioned just a moment ago, and sorry for the whiplash there, but there's a lot going on tonight. We also talked about how there is action and more legal drama, if you will, in a courtroom out west. This one in L.A., where we have seen now the president's son, Hunter Biden, plead not guilty to the tax charges he's facing. We saw him pull into court. Want to show you there. No cameras in court, but there he is arriving in the latest twist in a long legal saga for him, with the judge proposing a trial date for June. In this case, Hunter Biden is accused of failing to file and pay his taxes, the prosecution alleges. In their words, they say rather than pay his taxes, the defendant spent millions of dollars on an extravagant lifestyle. Mike Memley is covering this one for us live on the ground in Los Angeles. And it all went down, remember, L.A., 3 hours behind East Coast. Went down in just the last hour here. Give us some insight into color in the room there. Hunter Biden was with his attorney, right, with other people that are close to him. Explain what happened and how it fits into the bigger legal picture against him.
So, Hallie, we've been saying all day we expected a rather routine appearance here, an arraignment typically about 15 to 20 to 30 minutes, and largely a procedural process. But there were some interesting developments here, which I think speak to the potential legal strategy for Hunter Biden going forward. Yes, he did enter that not guilty plea for all of those 9 tax-related charges. But then there was a bit of an argument, a bit of a back and forth between the government's prosecutor, Leo Wise, and Abby Lowell, representing Hunter Biden, about some of the motions that might come up ahead of what would be a June 20th 2024 trial date. This all has to do with how we got here in the first place, Hallie. You remember last July, Hunter Biden was in a Delaware courtroom expecting to plead guilty as part of a plea agreement that had been reached between federal prosecutors and his legal team that would have ended all this case long ago. Instead, of course, that plea famously fell apart. And Abby Lowell signaled that he wants to, as part of a trial, as part of his defense of his client, Hunter Biden, take issue with the way in which that plea deal fell apart. He talked about the fact that there may have been undue interference in how the federal government, the federal prosecutors have handled this. So we know Abby Lowell has been outspoken in suggesting that that David Weiss, the U.S. attorney, now the special counsel overseeing Hunter Biden's prosecution here, may have been reacting to pressure from House Republicans about what they had called a sweetheart deal. So now this may not necessarily just be a trial about the circumstances around which Hunter Biden did not pay $1.4 million in taxes that were owed, but the actual way in which this case itself has been handled is an interesting potential constitutional issue. And I have to say, Hallie, maybe not necessarily an approach that the White House and that political advisors to President Biden might like to see in this case.
Well, you have some new reporting, I know, on that front, too. And let me, before I get there, Mem, are there hecklers outside court? Like, has there been a crowd of people who've been out there? We can hear something behind you. I assume that's what that is?
Yeah, you know, there's a robust opportunity here for people to take advantage of their freedom of expression, freedom of speech on federal grounds, especially near cameras. And so our friends are enjoying that right to its fullest.
Real quick, Mem, this is all obviously just almost exactly 24 hours after Hunter Biden was on my coast, in my town where I am, in Washington, D.C., that scene where he walked in unexpectedly to that House hearing, House Republicans, looking to hold him in contempt of Congress. You have some new reporting here on what the White House did or maybe did not know about that moment going down?
Yeah, it's so interesting, Hallie, because, of course, we also remember that dramatic statement that Hunter Biden delivered in front of the U.S. Capitol on December 13th when he was supposed to have appeared before the House committees investigating him and his father. And in that case, we did hear quickly from White House officials that, yes, they may not have necessarily known about what that was going to occur that day, but that the president, that the view of the Biden team was that they were proud of him, that this was a strong moment. We did not get that kind of response yesterday to this kind of spectacle, almost a little bit of Hollywood drama, I'll say, why we're here in L.A. And so I think that speaks to the difficulty. Yes, we know, Dr. Jill Biden telling our colleague Mika Brzezinski about how she views this as a mother, as a grandmother, very much of a personal thing. The president has also said how proud he is of his son. But the president's political and legal advisors have very much been in the dark and have very mixed feelings about the way in which Hunter has chosen to be at times provocative and at times antagonistic to especially the House Republicans. In this case, they prefer to see this handled quietly, try to avoid the perception of politics overplaying here. And so that's certainly part of the drama of this as it continues over the campaign year ahead, Hallie.
Mike Memoli live for us in L.A. Thank you. Let's talk about now tonight, the country bracing for yet another string of huge storms that could trigger even more tornadoes. We're talking about a potential bomb cyclone. That's when the pressure drops really fast, so the storms get big very quickly. That could bring some blizzard conditions and some really intense rain to the eastern half of the country through the weekend. Forecasts say the biggest risks are super big hail, floodwaters, tornadoes potential in the south. If you have deja vu, you're not wrong. This is the second act, essentially, right? We talk about a 1-2 punch. This is the second part of that 1-2 punch after this damage from dozens of deadly tornadoes just this week. And in an update to a story I brought you last night, sheriffs are identifying the victim of the avalanche at a mountain in Lake Tahoe. It's a 66-year-old Kenneth Kidd. That ski resort is opening back up today with the rescue effort now over. Let me bring in meteorologist Bill Cairns now. And Bill, you have been forecasting this, sort of ominously warning about exactly this for close to a week now. You had part one, these monster storms moving across the country. Part two now is coming up quick. What do we expect?
Hallie, we still have 100,000 people without power from the last storm, and then this storm's already moving in. So, you know, and conditions are already ripe for additional flooding, even though the storm will not be as much rain as the last one. So the storm is now moving out of the Rockies into the plains. We just went under blizzard warnings for almost the entire state of Iowa. The worst of this will be late tonight and then all day Friday. Chicago's now under a winter storm warning along with Milwaukee and Green Bay. And by the way, we have another storm coming behind this. We already have warnings out in areas of the west for that storm. So for this storm coming up, the highest snow totals, northern Illinois, Chicago northward, 6 foot, possibly 12. Isolated areas could get up to 18 inches. But it's the winds are going to be so intense. There's going to be so much blowing and drifting. It's going to make travel almost impossible. We're worried about people getting stuck on the roads. And then we're also, again, in the west, all the mountainous areas, the avalanche threat grows as that heavy snow continues right through the week. Then severe weather. This will be late tonight, right over the Arklateck area, right around Shreveport, the Little Rock. We do not expect a ton of tornadoes tonight. A lot of large hail, damaging winds. The tornado threat is greater tomorrow afternoon and at this time tomorrow. We're going to take that threat early in the morning in areas of Mississippi, and then we'll sweep it through the southeast as we go through, Atlanta, Savannah, Charleston, tomorrow night in areas of North Carolina. And this is the area of greatest tornado threat all through the south. Now, the tornado threat's not as great with this storm as it was last time, but all it takes is 1 or 2 strong ones for a really bad afternoon and evening. And then the flooding, 27 million people, I-95, Hallie, from D.C. to Philly to New York, another 1 to 2 inches of rain. We still have rivers that are flooding right now, and they're going to go back up because of this rainfall. It's ugly just to do this one after another.
Totally. I mean, the next 48 hours are going to be so critical. Bill Cairns, thank you for keeping an eye on all of it. Appreciate it. Tonight, the FAA says it will officially investigate Boeing after that door plug basically blew a hole in the side of the wall of that Alaska Airlines plane about a week ago. The FAA saying in a statement the incident should never have happened and it cannot happen again. Now, already, Alaska has grounded 170 planes from the 737 MAX 9 fleet. Boeing says it'll cooperate fully and transparently with that investigation. I want to bring in our senior correspondent, Tom Costello, who's got more on this. It seems like every day since this happened, Tom, there has been something else, something new in trying to make sure that essentially people feel comfortable and safe getting on these MAX 9s again. What does this investigation now formally opening mean for Boeing?
To be clear, this is an investigation into Boeing itself, right? Not the cause of the crash, but did Boeing screw up? Let me just read you a part of the statement from the FAA because it's very telling. This investigation will determine if Boeing failed to ensure completed products conform to its approved design and were in a condition for safe operation in compliance with FAA regulations. That says it all right there. Boeing's manufacturing practices need to comply with the high safety standards that they are legally accountable to meet. That's the bottom line. The FAA is now looking at this company, its performance, the way that it turns out planes following this MAX 9 incident, and the context, as you well know, we've talked about it many times, this follows 5 years ago, 2 MAX 8 crashes that killed 346 people. And Boeing has admitted to and been investigated for multiple quality control problems throughout that period and ever since that period. So the FAA now doing another investigation. But I got to tell you, Hallie, the FAA itself is under pressure. You know, they were supposed to, following the MAX 8, really have an eagle eye on the entire manufacturing process with inspectors in the plant, at the Boeing plant. The question is, where were the FAA inspectors? And at the moment, that's a question to be answered. But Washington Senator Cantwell is demanding answers. Where was the FAA? Where were the FAA inspectors who were supposed to be holding Boeing accountable in their own facility?
Tom Costello, thank you very much for that update and for staying on top of all of it. Appreciate it. Republican presidential candidates are loading up on the campaign trail just 4 days before the Iowa caucuses. Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, all out meeting potential voters, with Haley and DeSantis picking up from where they left off from last night's debate, taking some jabs at each other.
It was me versus Nikki, I'm sorry.
DeSantisLies.com. I finally just put it on a website because I'm like, it's too many things.
New polling out today shows Haley pulling right there neck and neck, essentially, with DeSantis, a little ahead maybe among likely Iowa caucus goers. Distant second, of course, because remember, President Trump is still double digits in the lead here. He, of course, was not on the campaign trail, as we talked about at the top of the show. He was in court. I want to bring in Vaughn Hilliard, who's live for us in Urbandale, Iowa. Okay, gut check, vibe check, whatever you want to call it, Vaughn. What's your sense of how things are going on the ground besides cold?
Right. I'm on the campaign trail. The other person on the campaign trail, Hallie, is one of his sons, Don Jr. While the Trump family business is on the line in lower Manhattan today, Don Jr. just a few minutes ago wrapped an event here in the Des Moines suburb of Urbandale. You know, look, the polls really haven't changed. Donald Trump has a commanding lead here in the state yet. You know, this is the caucus here, and anything goes, especially on a night like this upcoming Monday night when we're looking at temperatures under 0 degrees. I want to let you hear from a voter that we talked to earlier today over at Haley's campaign, in which he opened up and expressed potential openness to Nikki Haley, believing that potentially she could pull off a general election win.
I get the feeling that she's growing and her poll numbers are rising. I definitely think she can beat Biden hands down if she can get by Trump.
You know, this is sort of the oddity of the Iowa caucus this go around. Well, Donald Trump is not on the campaign trail. The likes of Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley, they're trying to make up ground. And as you heard from Roger there talking with Garrett, there's a potential openness here and an understanding from these campaigns that they can't come in second place by too much. They've got to have a strong showing to convince the Republican electorate in these other states, but also donors that they're worth getting behind here as they move towards New Hampshire and other places.
Our loyal viewers, Vaughn, will remember that last night we covered as breaking news as it happened, Chris Christie suspending his campaign, dropping out of the race in New Hampshire. You and our team, I know, are behind some new reporting here on the possibility that the former New Jersey governor now is getting courted by No Labels, this sort of independent outside third-party group type thing, to maybe get on board with them. What do we know?
Right. This is the political organization that over the last decade has worked to build a bipartisan consensus and coalitions in Washington, D.C. But for the first time, they're trying to build a potential bipartisan presidential ticket that has a Republican and a Democrat on it. But so far, they haven't named any names. But our new reporting suggests that there has been engagement between No Labels and allies of Chris Christie. Of course, you heard yesterday Chris Christie make the case that he's going to do whatever he can over the next 10 months to make sure Donald Trump is not the next president of the United States. And No Labels is actively trying to build this third-party ticket and is trying to court Chris Christie into considering joining that effort. Of course, we are just about 10 months away from the general election here, and it would be a heck of an operation to try to build out a third-party run. But that's what this organization is trying to do, and they're trying to look for a big name to help them do it. And Chris Christie could be it.
Vaughn Hilliard live for us there in Urbandale. Vaughn, thank you so much. I will see you. I will see everybody there on the ground in Iowa on Monday with our full coverage starting right here on NBC News Now, 5 o'clock Eastern time, then 7 o'clock for the special report. Coming up here on this show, more on that intense video showing the moments that deputies rescued a grandma and a baby from a car as it fills with water. Look at that. Plus, how the issue of homelessness is affecting students in the second biggest school district in the country, with the superintendent's now telling NBC News. It is the start of a new era in New England, with Bill Belichick and the Patriots in corporate speak mutually agreeing to part ways. In regular human person speak, they're breaking up. After decades together, there he is, Bill Belichick with team owner Robert Kraft. And they're making the announcement that, honestly, I think a lot of people thought might have been coming. We even covered it here on this show, as you might remember, not too long ago. Belichick, it was kind of a bittersweet moment. He was saying that being in New England was exceeding even his wildest dreams. And he gave a big thank you to the fans.
So appreciative of the fans for all the support they've given me, my family, and this football team. And it's with just so many fond memories and thoughts that I think about the Patriots, and I'll always be a Patriot. I look forward to coming back here, but at this time, we're gonna move on.
Now, this particular season wasn't Belichick's best. He went 4-13. It's actually the worst he's ever done in his career, but overall, it's an all-time great record, right? 24 seasons as the head coach of the Pats, 296 total wins, and as much as it pains me to say it, credit where credit is due, 6 Super Bowl titles, more than any other NFL head coach. Now that we have that out of the way, Sam Brock is joining us now. And listen, sure, Belichick is a big deal in the world of football, obviously. I mean, he's one of the most iconic NFL head coaches that's been sort of in the game. He's also kind of this cultural figure, too. I mean, even seeing him not in a hoodie at that news conference today, people are like, oh, that's like a little bit different. I mean, he in some ways transcended just football.
Not just suit and tie, Hallie, but I think those are the most words I've ever heard Bill Belichick string together in any form of press conference ever in the history of Bill Belichick. I also suspect that you and I sort of had the same coming of age when it comes to our sports teams around the same time. Of course, you're a well-noted Eagles fan. I'm a Giants fan. These are the only 2 teams in the Belichick era that were able to win a Super Bowl against Bill. So obviously, he went on quite a roll. The stats are astounding when you break it down. This man's success over that couple of decades. First of all, 24 seasons you mentioned. Okay, he made the playoffs in 19 of 24 seasons. I believe the number of victories, postseason victories that he had, 44 victories in the postseason, or I should say 44 games, 31 victories, a 31-13 record in the playoffs. That is incredible. As for the hoodies that you referenced, yes, that's Belichick's signature. It was brought up at the press conference today, actually by Robert Kraft, and here's why this is important. He said, I look forward to seeing Bill in a hoodie on another sideline, and I'll root for him as long as it's not against our team, which is to say that Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, believes that Bill Belichick is not done coaching in the NFL.
Where could he go, and who could coach the Pats now?
Great question. So the Pats is an open-ended question, although Gerard Mayo, who is a linebackers coach, considered a young star, emerging young star in the coaching ranks, is considered to be the favorite for that position. As far as Belichick is concerned, though, there are 7 NFL head coaching jobs right now that are vacant, and they vary in terms of, how good the setup is. I would say personally the best is probably the Los Angeles Chargers or the Tennessee Titans. The Chargers have Justin Herbert, potentially a transcendent talent at the quarterback position, though it hasn't been unearthed yet. Anyone else that Belichick has worked with that has a lot of talent at the quarterback position? Tom Brady. So you would think he might want to go there, except it's a West Coast move. All sorts of speculation. Where will he be taken in? He's definitely developed a reputation, so we'll have to see, Hallie.
Well, so you mentioned Tom Brady, and there is this, I think, debate that happens, and it's going to happen for a long time. Was it Belichick that had the magic during that sort of run for the Patriots? Was it Belichick plus Brady, right? Because one of the things that we looked at were the numbers. Winning record when it was Belichick and Brady, not a winning record once it was just Belichick. You can see without Tom Brady, he went 84-103. With him, 249-75. Now, full disclosure, we had one of the NBC analysts on a couple nights ago who was like, I hate this debate. And credit to him, Devin McCourty, love him, right? But he's like, whatever. He's like, I hate this question. But it's still, I think, a super valid question for people who maybe didn't, used to play for the Pats.
Here's why it's insightful. So, yes, he won a lot more with Brady. Brady also allowed the Patriots to have a much better roster based on taking pay cuts at the quarterback position so they could fill out the rest of their roster. He leaves, and there's more emphasis then on the other position that Bill Belichick holds, which was GM, right? In modern NFL terms, usually you have a coach, you got a GM. Bill assumed both of those jobs. He whiffed on so many draft picks. His personnel evaluation was not good by all accounts within the industry, right? He cost them star receivers, dynamic offensive players, and then you're looking at this roster that is essentially devoid of talent. That was part of the problem, is he consolidated too much power. Robert Kraft wouldn't exactly come out and say that today, but he certainly suggested it, and that's likely the reason why, one of them anyway, you're seeing this chapter finally turning.
Do you think people think they accidentally turned on ESPN just now, our viewers, Sam?
I hope that I can just give you one little shade of Adam Schefter, but I don't think anyone's going to confuse me for him anytime soon. But that's very flattering to do. Thank you.
Sam Brock, if you weren't a Giants fan, man, we'd be besties. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Just that.
Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1. We told you about what's happening down in Ecuador. Well, guess what? The violence there is certainly not over. More today with the government battling drug trafficking gangs. A bomb scare in the capital today. Officials are dealing with a nightclub arson, too, that killed at least 2 people and hurt 9 others. They're investigating. And according to the prisons agency, prisoners have now taken more staff hostage. A very serious situation in Ecuador. Number 2, a group of Jewish students is suing Harvard, saying the university is letting anti-Semitism spread. They say Harvard's selectively enforcing its policies, not protecting Jewish students, and hiring professors who share anti-Semitic propaganda. Harvard is declining to comment. Number 3, Google's laying off hundreds of people from some of its departments, including voice assistants and engineering. This is after both Google and its parent company, Alphabet, says they're going to cut costs, and after Amazon laid off hundreds of people earlier this week. In a statement, Google says it wants to invest in its biggest priorities, but the Alphabet Workers Union called this another round of needless layoffs. Number 4. Not to be the bearer of bad news, but the price you're paying for stuff is still going up a little more than economists expected. The new Consumer Price Index report shows prices went up 0.3% last month. It's up 3.4%, 3.4% from a year ago. A lot of it is from rising home costs, so homes are getting more expensive. Number 5, check it out. This is the first piece of mail ever sent with a stamp. And it could be yours for an TBD sum, because Sotheby's is auctioning it off. This is a penny black on a Mulready envelope from 1840. Sotheby's says it revolutionized the way people correspond with each other. It's expected to go for more than $1 million. That's pretty cool. Turning to California now, where a crisis with homelessness is threatening to become a crisis in education, too, for public school students who do not have a permanent home. Right now, there are more than 13,000 students in the L.A. school district experiencing homelessness. That's a 19% spike from 2022 to 2023. So you can see that has gone up. It's a obviously public issue, but also a personal one for one L.A. superintendent who was once experiencing homelessness himself. Stephanie Gosk has been reporting this story. She's joining us now. Steph, you spoke to that superintendent. You talked to a student who's experiencing homelessness.
Yeah.
Talk us through this issue, right? Because it is a big one and it is a heavy one. So what did they tell you?
Yeah, it's a really important issue. And I spoke with Superintendent Alberto Carvalho. And, you know, one of the things we talked about, Hallie, and you'll understand this, is that we've got all these campaigns going on. We've got a campaign for president going on, and there are no candidates who talk about education. But LA's experience is not that different from many other large cities in this country. They're dealing with a high cost of living, a migrant crisis. Everything's more expensive, and you have more homelessness on the streets of these cities. And of course, that translates into children who are experiencing homelessness and trying to go to school. And what does that mean? These schools are absorbing these kids. They want to help them. They have to devote a limited amount of resources that they have to helping them and their families. That affects not only these students, but also the entire school system. Now you've got Alberto Carvalho, who is the superintendent of this very important school district, who comes from this personal experience that is really remarkable. When he was a teenager, he was homeless himself. Listen to what he said to me.
Education saved me and made me. You know, I remember sleeping under the bridges of Miami, blocks away from the office that ultimately I occupied as superintendent. I remember the harshness of my mattress then, which was the concrete of the ground, and the stars as the blanket.
This is personal for you.
It's very personal.
What's what scares him now, Hallie, as he looks around at the landscape that we're in, we're also talking about pandemic learning loss and all of the struggles that school systems are facing. And what he said to me is it looks even more difficult for students to break that cycle of homelessness than it was for him back when he was 18 living under those bridges in Miami.
Talk about then how school districts, maybe in LA, but even beyond just LA, because there's obviously so many districts where this is an issue, what they can do to support these families, what they can do to support these kids.
Well, first, it starts with trying to bring them some stability at home, and that means trying to find them a place to live that is more longer term. Now, the family that I met this 14-year-old girl, Vanessa. They were in a converted hotel room. She was with her 10-year-old brother and her mom, a very cramped space, and it was temporary. They have, since we met them, have moved into something more permanent. So that's important. You try to bring that stability. Also try to help the family invest in the early school programs, after school programs. But it is also, just as we mentioned earlier, an intention issue. Why aren't people talking about this? Because what happens to these kids, they are kids now, but they will soon be adults. And the adult problems that they will experience if they aren't getting the help that they need now to get their feet on the ground and have successful lives, it becomes even exponentially bigger when they become adults. Hallie.
Such a good point, Stephanie Goss. Thank you so much for bringing us some of these voices, some of these stories, and we're looking forward to seeing more from Steph and her reporting tonight on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. That's tonight, 6:30 Eastern, wherever you watch your local NBC station. We've got a lot more to get to when we come back, including our original here on this show with Richard Engel, talking with one of the top leaders of a small group of militants targeting ships in the Red Sea. Why tensions there could push the region closer to war. More on the Houthis next. So tonight's original now with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. The U.S. is now claiming some cautious success as the Secretary of State wraps up that huge diplomatic tour in the Mideast, where he's trying to push Israel to essentially scale back fighting to a more targeted approach and embrace a place for Gaza whenever this war ends. The other big deal, of course, is to try to avoid a broader regional war, as we're just hearing reports that Britain's top leader is holding a full cabinet meeting tonight, as we're seeing more and more attacks in the Red Sea, specifically with Houthi rebels going after commercial ships there. Our team, our Richard Engel, one-on-one with the top Houthi leader who's pointing the finger at Israel for the growing conflicts. Here's more.
Hallie, the Houthis have been a powerful force inside Yemen for years, but it was only after Israel's invasion of Gaza against Hamas that they really emerged on the world stage when they began to blockade the Red Sea. The Houthis say they are blockading the Red Sea in retaliation for Israel's blockade of Gaza.
Well armed and undeterred by American and international threats, Yemeni militants known as the Houthis have disrupted traffic in the Red Sea, sent cargo prices skyrocketing, and could trigger a regional war. This week, the militants launched their biggest attack yet, firing more than 20 drones and missiles at commercial ships in the southern Red Sea, all shot down by U.S. and British warships deployed to protect the vital shipping lane. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warning the Houthis' actions would not be tolerated.
All I can tell you is that, as we made clear, and many other countries made clear, there'll be consequences for the Houthis' actions.
But who are the Houthis? They call themselves Ansar Allah, Arabic for followers of God. A rebel group backed by Iran, the militants took over northern Yemen in early 2015, including the capital Sana'a. Long at war with Saudi Arabia, which supports the old Yemeni government the militants overthrew, the Houthis burst onto the international stage after Hamas's October 7th attacks in Israel and Israel's devastating war of reprisal in Gaza. The once little-known militant group quickly began launching missiles and drones at Israel in solidarity with Hamas and the Palestinians in Gaza. They released highly produced videos of their raids on commercial ships. While other Arab states have condemned Israel but not acted, the Houthis have seen their popularity soar in the Middle East. The group even opened one ship it captured to the public as a kind of museum. Companies, including Maersk, have already diverted all marine traffic from the Red Sea. The Houthis say they will stop their attacks as soon as Israel ends its war in Gaza. But has the group overplayed its hand? We spoke with Mohammed al-Buhaithi, one of the top Houthi leaders, by video link from the Yemeni capital, Sana'a.
Do you really want a war with the United States and other countries right now?
لا نريد أي حرب مع أي طرف ونحن نريد السلام ولكن السلام العادل وليس السلام الذي تريده أمريكا لأن أمريكا تريد فرض هيمنتها على المنطقة ليس فقط على فلسطين.
Do you coordinate with Hamas, Hezbollah, Iraqi groups, other, let's call them groups that are supported by Iran?
بالتأكيد هناك تنسيق بين دول محور المقاومة وهذا التنسيق هو في الموجهات العامة وليس في كل التفاصيل. وبالنسبة لنا في اليمن نحن بيننا تنسيق وبين المقاومة الفلسطينية ولكن في النهاية قرار كل دولة من دول محور المقاومة هو قرار مستقل.
By taking on the United States, do you think maybe you've taken on more than you can chew? A fight that is too big for your capacity?
نعم عندما نقوم بالحسبة المادية فهذا صحيح وإنما نتحرك بقوة الله سبحانه وتعالى ولذلك نحن سنتحرك من أجل نجدة إخواننا في فلسطين مهما كلفنا ذلك من تضحية.
Pressure is mounting on the United States to take military action against the Houthis. But that comes with the risk of further expanding war in the Middle East during one of the region's most volatile times in years.
The United States has built a coalition against the Houthis in Yemen, and the Pentagon, according to numerous U.S. officials, is considering military action. Hallie?
Our thanks so much to Richard Engel for that reporting. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Southern Bureau, take a look at some of this new body cam footage showing firefighters and deputies in Florida rescuing a family trapped in their car. So there they are. The car goes off the road. It goes into a ditch, fills with water. They smash the car window. They pull a grandmother out. They pull her grandbaby out as well. Just incredible. Both of them are expected to be okay. Out of our Western Bureau, police in L.A. say a 71-year-old man who spent more than half his life in prison for robbing banks is back at it again. Arrested in connection with stealing $60,000 from a bank last month, police are calling him a serial bank robber. They say he's been charged with second-degree robbery and kidnapping. And out of our Northeast Bureau, officials are issuing emergency work orders to try to stabilize a synagogue in New York City. Remember, we told you earlier this week how that 60-foot-long tunnel was discovered underneath the synagogue? Officials are now trying to make sure people are safe. They're issuing vacate orders, meaning people should leave buildings nearby for safety reasons. They want to make sure it's all structurally okay. Coming up here on the show, the State Department is warning Americans not to use dating apps in Colombia. But that may have to do with the string of suspicious deaths. Next. To Colombia now, where the U.S. Embassy there is warning Americans traveling to Colombia not to use dating apps after the suspicious deaths of 8 Americans. And while the deaths that happened at the end of last year are not believed to be linked to each other, a few of them do involve using some of these dating apps, according to the embassy, which says criminals end up using these, using the apps to lure people to meet in public places, and they assault or rob them. Kathy Park is joining us now. It is a startling warning, Kathy. What else do we know about it?
Hey there, Hallie. Good to be with you. Well, first of all, if you're planning on heading to Colombia, you should probably reconsider it because the State Department has issued a level 3 travel advisory because of the crime in that country. But yeah, there is that alarming and eye-opening warning about dating apps. They're saying that these criminals are luring their victims, meeting them via the dating apps in these public spaces, restaurants, bars, etc. And then they're taking it a step further further and assaulting their victims, robbing these victims. And this is happening across the country in all the major cities. These crimes are being reported. But oftentimes, Hallie, these victims are not coming forward and reporting these crimes because they're embarrassed about what happened to them, and they don't want to take the next step and actually prosecute these individuals. So these numbers, these crimes might actually be higher than what's currently being reported right now.
What do people need to do to make sure that they're keeping themselves safe if they do decide to travel, if not to Colombia, really anywhere? I mean, there's some best practices that people can follow no matter where they are, right?
Exactly. So we should note there were no specific apps that were mentioned in the travel alert, the warning that was issued in Colombia by U.S. officials. But we did reach out to the Match Group and also Bumble, some of the bigger dating apps. Right now, we haven't heard back. But U.S. officials, or rather the U.S. Embassy in Colombia, did have a couple of pointers. If you are in the country, first of all, be cautious if you do plan on going on the app. Also, try to meet the individual in a public space. Don't do it in an isolated area. And also, if you're in a hotel, an Airbnb, but if you are in an area where you can connect with a concierge or front desk, have some sort of policy in place so that when you have a visitor, you know exactly who that person is and when they are leaving. And also not a bad idea to just let your loved ones know, your family members, your friends, know that you're going on a date after you connect with someone on the app. Let them know exactly where you're going, the time, the location, and the app that's being used. And lastly, Hallie, if you're meeting the individual and your instincts are telling you something is wrong, just go with your gut and just walk away. Hallie?
Always good advice. Kathy Park, thank you. Still to come here on the show, a years-long investigation into a missing mom now declared dead, finally going to trial today. We're going behind the scenes with a reporter who's been covering this case, an alleged cover-up from the very beginning. That's our backstory next. Tonight, court is wrapping up in day one of what will be one of the higher-profile trials of the year. The victim, a Connecticut mother of 5 who went missing. Her body never found after years of searching. In a story that went national almost instantly, prosecutors alleging the husband of Jennifer Dulos and his girlfriend worked together to plan Jennifer's killing. The girlfriend, Michelle Troconis, is pleading not guilty as she now faces the charge of conspiracy to commit murder. And while people coast to coast heard about what happened, it's the local reporters on the ground who covered every in and out, every development in this case, including NBC Connecticut's Shannon Miller. She's been reporting on this story for years. She's got tonight's backstory.
A missing mother of 5. Now to the case of missing New Canaan mother Jennifer Dulos. The frantic search for her captivating the public. The estranged husband charged with murder, but his suicide under house arrest blowing up the entire case. And her body never found. Now, more than 4 years of investigations and legal drama, the grieving family of murdered mom Jennifer Dulos is finally getting a chance at justice. The trial of Michelle Troconis kicking off in a Connecticut courthouse. She stands accused of conspiring with Dulos' husband to plan the murder, charges she has pleaded not guilty to. I've been covering every twist and turn as a reporter for NBC Connecticut along the way. Lots of photographs being taken out here tonight.
Jennifer is an incredibly gentle and wonderful person. She loves her children dearly.
It began in May of 2019. Family and friends of Dulos reported her as missing, kicking off a statewide search. Almost immediately, suspicion landed on her husband, Fotis Dulos. The two were in the middle of a messy divorce and child custody battle. His new girlfriend, Michelle Troconis, also suspected.
A stunning development. Fotis Dulos, along with another woman, are under arrest in connection with the criminal investigation.
A week later, prosecutors charged a couple with evidence tampering and hindering prosecution. Surveillance video caught Fotis Dulos disposing of items that were found to contain traces of Jennifer's blood. Fotis' defense team hitting back with a shocking claim that Jennifer might have staged her own disappearance, like the plot of the book Gone Girl.
We are actively contemplating a revenge suicide hypothesis as an explanation for her disappearance.
Prosecutors not convinced by that theory, but after months of searching, they still had no idea where Jennifer Dulos was. But 8 months after Jennifer went missing, prosecutors felt they had enough physical and circumstantial evidence to bring charges. In January of 2020, they charged Fotis Dulos with murder and charged girlfriend Michelle Troconis with conspiracy to commit murder.
Michelle Troconis in handcuffs.
Both of them put under house arrest as they waited trial. But then, just weeks later, a disturbing twist. This is where it all began earlier this morning at Fotis Dulos' Farmington home, that suicide attempt. Fotis Dulos rushed to the hospital after attempting suicide at his home in Connecticut.
When officers responded, they could see through a window that Mr. Dulos was sitting in his vehicle, and he had obvious signs of medical distress.
The accused, father of 5, trying to die by carbon monoxide poisoning in his garage. Then, 2 days later,
Fotis Dulos was declared dead tonight at 5:32.
Prosecutors' main suspect gone, leaving behind a suicide note proclaiming his innocence.
Quote, I refuse to spend even an hour more in jail for something I had nothing to do with.
The next day, I sat down with Dulos' attorneys, who vowed to clear their client's name.
He was accused by the world, and there was nowhere he wouldn't go or could go without whispering and hateful comments made about him.
Leaving his girlfriend, Michelle, to fend for herself in court. In May of that year, Troconis breaking her nearly year-long silence, proclaiming her innocence in a statement, saying she didn't know what Fotis was capable of, and, quote, I think it was a mistake to have trusted him. NBC's Dateline features the saga that year, and I was happy to help provide context through all the twists and turns.
We were finally able to put a face with this name. That immediate day after, it was the lead story on every single newscast.
Another 3 years passed without a major break in the case. Jennifer Dulos' body is still missing. Her memory lives on in her 5 children and in a makeshift memorial. But her most enduring legacy may be Jennifer's Law, signed by Connecticut's governor on the 2-year anniversary of Dulos' disappearance, which broadens the definition of domestic violence to better protect victims.
Shannon is joining us now from NBC Connecticut's newsroom up in West Hartford. Shannon, we're so glad to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Hallie. This case has just gripped Connecticut for years. And today, no different. Michelle Troconis walking into Stamford Superior Court. And I have to tell you, she's done this dozens of times. But there was something different about today's court appearance. It was eerily silent when she walked in, Hallie. You could feel the weight of what today means, finally getting to this point.
You know, this segment, in so many ways, Shannon, we talk about the backstory, right? Taking us behind the scenes, as you did there, sort of step by step, covering a case like this when you're on the ground at the local level, doing it sort of day in and day out. Talk us through now. Here we are years later, and it is the start of what is going to be, I think, a very closely watched trial, not just where you are in Connecticut, but around the country.
Yeah, I think what struck me the most today was just, again, that feeling of the weight of finally being here at the courthouse. When I made it upstairs, both Troconis' family were there, Jennifer Dulos' family were there. There were tears when Jennifer's mother walked into the courtroom, and then that tension just got even stronger today, Hallie, because for the first time we saw these brand new videos from New Canaan police and state police, that body-worn camera video of them coming into Jennifer Dulos' house for the very first time after she'd been reported missing. You see these lives of her 5 children just come to a standstill. Their shoes still in the mudroom, their toys still out in the home. Their kitchen looked like they had balloons up there in that house the day and the night before she went missing. So these details are really going to start to unravel. We're going to start to see what we heard about, Hallie, and those arrest warrants play out visually, and both from testimony from witnesses.
Shannon Miller, thank you so much for bringing us such a comprehensive look at this. I'm sure we'll talk again in the days and weeks to come. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. That does it for us for this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now. Tonight, the dramatic face-off in court between former President Trump and the judge who will decide the future of his business. The surprise statement from Mr. Trump. What is next in this case and what it all means for 2024? We've got every angle covered in just a minute. Then, in another courtroom out west, the president's son, President Biden, that is, as Hunter Biden pleads not guilty to felony tax charges. But our team in the room says it was like, and more on the legal drama that could send Hunter Biden to prison for years. And no relief from this streak of just punishing weather. The bomb cyclone, as they call it, that could bring everything from blizzards to flooding to tornadoes. We've got your forecast up ahead. Then tonight, a new official investigation into Boeing, the FAA's promise of never again after a door plug blew out of that Alaska Airlines flight. And the start of a new era in the NFL with the Patriots for maybe the first time since you've been alive without Bill Belichick on their roster. What's next for him and the team later on in the show? Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air tonight with the fate of former President Trump's real estate empire now in the hands of a judge after Mr. Trump insulted that judge to his face. Part of a surprise closing argument delivered in dramatic fashion by the former president himself. The New York Attorney General, a target of Mr. Trump's anger today and really constantly throughout this 44-day trial, saying in just the last hour that she can take the heat. Watch.
I want everyone to know that the personal attacks really don't bother me. This case has never been about politics or personal vendetta or about name-calling. This case is about the facts and the law. And Mr. Donald Trump violated the law.
So the AG wants a $370 million fine against Mr. Trump, and she wants him banned from the New York real estate industry for life. But of course, as you might imagine, the former president disagrees with what you just heard. He says his legal issues are actually a political issue.
I guess you'd consider it part of the campaign, because if you really look at it, they are doing this. It's never been done like this in this country.
So remember what the judge now has to decide as of tonight, just how Mr. Trump, his oldest sons, and his company should be punished for allegedly overinflating the value of his properties by millions of dollars. Even before this civil fraud trial started, the judge had ruled there was fraud. So this is now just a question legally of consequences. That's what this is about. What are the consequences going to be? And we will find out at some point soon in what will be the end to a trial marked by personal attacks, by those threats against the attorney general, even against the judge himself, with at one point this morning, a bomb threat allegedly delaying the start of the proceedings, according to a source familiar with that situation. NBC's Rahema Ellis is outside court in New York for us. And so here we are, Rahema, right? It's in the hands of the judge now. But we have heard, even in just the last couple of hours, from both Mr. Trump and from the New York AG. Walk us through it.
Well, we did hear from both those sides, and Mr. Trump doing exactly what you mentioned, and that is stating the kinds of things that the judge did not want him to say, and he got a chance to do it in the courtroom in a surprise, abrupt change of his decision. The judge allowed him to do that. What both sides did today was they drilled down on the arguments that they have been making for the past 3 months. In fact, let's take it from the first part of the state. In their closing arguments, they presented financial statements from a decade that they said were false. And this was essentially, they were talking, for example, about Mr. Trump's penthouse apartment on Madison Avenue, which he said was 30,000 square feet. In fact, it is only 10,000 square feet. The state also said he got favorable loans provided under false pretenses. For his part, the Trump team said there were no witnesses who testified to fraud, and they called it a victimless crime. There was information in the court today, however, the judge indicating that there does not have to be evidence of harm for there to be a crime. That's essentially what the prosecution is saying in this. And Letitia James said on these steps of this courthouse just within the last hour that she feels that a crime was committed, and now she hopes that justice will prevail. Hallie?
Take us through a little bit of the color around what this has been like, right? Because Mr. Trump showed up today. He obviously hasn't had to be showing up in court, but as we played at the top of the show here, he is making clear that he sees this as almost part of his campaign apparatus. And we know from, of course, the reporting that our teams have done that sources close to his campaign do feel like every time he shows up in one of these moments, it galvanizes his supporters around him.
Yeah, he's been very strategic about when he would show up during this 3-month-long trial. He's made about 5 court appearances here, and each time it was in a critical moment of when testimony was being given, when evidence was being presented. Today, he wanted to be here for the closing argument. He wanted to make he wanted to be a part of that closing argument. There was back and forth between him and the judge about whether he could or couldn't, and the judge wanted to set some guidelines, some guardrails, if you will, not wanting him to make political statements, not using this as a soapbox, if you will, for campaigning. Well, the judge had a change of heart this afternoon, and he said he could, but he told Mr. Trump, you got to limit this to 5 minutes. It was a rapid statement that the former president gave, according to people who were inside that courtroom. They'd never heard him talk quite as quickly as this, almost as if he was recognizing he had a short amount of time in which he had to get a lot in. And what he got in was so much of what you were mentioning, saying that this was a witch hunt, that he was being persecuted, that he was an innocent man, that the attorney general was using this in an effort to inflate her own political ambitions. And at that point, the judge said to Trump's attorney, control your client. Shortly after that, they were able to end that part of the Trump team presentation, and court ended for lunch, and then the prosecution came back making their closing statements. But it was a dramatic moment, something that no one was expecting, and then suddenly there it was, full-blown, Hallie.
So now just real quick, Rahima, it's not like the judge is going to decide guilty or not guilty or liable or not liable. That's not what this is, right? This is about the sort of penalty consequence phase. What are the options on the table here?
Yeah, and what we should remind people is that this is a civil trial, not a criminal trial. So we're not talking about Mr. Trump being sentenced to X number of years in jail or behind bars. But we are talking about the very nature of what he is at his core, and that is a real estate magnate. And the judge has got to consider now what the prosecution is asking. They're asking for him that he would have to pay something like $370 million if he is found responsible for what the court is saying he has done, and that there would be monetary fees, as we were talking about, and there would be a lifetime ban on him from doing real estate business in New York. That hits at the core of who Donald Trump is and who he has presented himself to the country and to the world, Hallie.
Rahima Ellis, live for us there in New York City. Rahima, thank you very much. Let's take you to a different courtroom now out west in L.A. specifically, because that is where the president's son, Hunter Biden, was pleading not guilty to all 9 tax charges he's facing, including multiple felonies. No cameras in court, but we are just getting these sketches into us. You see Hunter Biden depicted there along with his attorney in what is really the latest twist in a long legal saga for the president's son. The judge is proposing a trial date now for June. In this case, Hunter Biden is accused of failing to file and pay his taxes. The prosecution says, in their words, instead, the defendant spent millions of dollars on an extravagant lifestyle. Mike Memley is covering this for us live on the ground in L.A. So listen, this was and it was expected to be a fairly pro forma appearance. What's notable here is that Hunter Biden had to speak a couple of times, acknowledging what the judge was saying, acknowledging that it was, in fact, him, at one point saying, right, Robert Hunter Biden, that was his name on the paperwork there.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. I mean, this did proceed, at least in the initial phase of this hearing, much as we expected to do. The judge, with the prosecution going through each of these charges, and then Hunter Biden, through his attorney, entering that plea of not guilty. But what got interesting was when there was a bit of a contentious exchange between Leo Wise, who was representing the special counsel in this case, David Weiss, and Abby Lowell, who is Hunter Biden's attorney here. And it all signals where this may end up heading. Because when you look at the facts of this case, yes, Hunter Biden has acknowledged he failed to pay his taxes over 4 years. He has not shied from that. He has, in his own words, taken accountability for this. He has paid back the taxes that were owed to the federal government. So you would then wonder, what is this trial going to end up look like? Well, Abby Lowell signaled that he wants to put the prosecution itself on trial, as they talked about what kind of motions might come as they prepare for a trial, and the date was set for June 20th at the earliest for that trial. Abby Lowell indicating that he wants to introduce a lot of evidence, documentation about how the plea agreement, which was supposed to end all these legal woes for Hunter Biden last summer, fell apart, and whether it fell apart because of potential political interference and the concern about oversight from House Republicans, who obviously are conducting their own investigation here. And so Wise did respond with his own defensiveness about the fact that these kinds of plea agreements fall apart all the time, but it's clear Abby Lowell signaling he wants this to be front and center in this case. And of course, we also know, as you know, Hallie, there is that separate trial which will eventually potentially happen in a Wilmington courtroom on those gun charges as well.
So, Mem, you know, I don't know if you had a chance to watch the show last night, but I will just say for viewers who did, they know that we walked through kind of how we got here from the legal perspective for Hunter Biden, the kind of timeline of the course of the last 8-10 years or so and how we sort of got to this point. There is also a political nexus to this, obviously. You look at the judge talking about a trial date maybe in June, just months before the 2024 election, of course, in which Hunter Biden's father is running to win back the White House. Republicans have made very clear that they are willing to put Hunter Biden at the center of the case that they are pressing against the president. And we saw that to a degree in very explicit terms yesterday when Hunter Biden showed up where I am here in Washington with that surprise appearance on Capitol Hill. You have some new reporting with our team. Sounds like the White House wasn't sort of formally notified that Hunter was going to be showing up in their neck of the woods.
Yeah, that's right. Advisors acknowledging that they had no heads up, essentially, of what this dramatic scene played out in the halls of Congress yesterday. It's a similar situation to when he made that statement in front of the U.S. Capitol in mid-December. What was different, though, is we did hear from aides to the president on that day saying that they felt it was a strong moment for Hunter Biden. Yesterday, there was no reaction at all from the White House, which indicates what has been something of a split between the president's legal and political advisors and what the president, as a father, views this. Of course, he does speak with his son often. He probably did have some insight. The fact that, at the very least, that he was in town and maybe going to engage with this contempt proceeding yesterday. Hallie, I will say, of course, you know I always watch both hours of your show. If not for the fact that I was flying out here yesterday, I would have been watching that. And I do, as you also know, I'm much more comfortable in maybe a caucus site than in a courtroom. And so you do look at that trial date of June 20th. We know what comes up in that summer. The Republican National Convention in July, the Democratic National Convention in August. And so when we talk about a trial beginning at the earliest of July 20th, June 20th, we know that that means the president could be engaging in the peak of his campaign in that summer months while his son is on trial. Certainly a distraction, at least it could be for the president.
Interesting and important point on timing there. Mike Memoli, thank you very much. We love to see it, as always. Appreciate it. Your reporting out from L.A. Thanks. So listen, tonight the FAA says it's going to officially investigate Boeing after that door plug blew out of an Alaska Airlines flight about a week ago, saying in a statement that the incident should never have happened and it cannot happen again. Already, 170 737 MAX 9 planes have been grounded, as Boeing says it'll cooperate fully and transparently with this investigation. Let's bring in NBC senior correspondent Tom Costello. So, Tom, I think, and you're making this point, it's an important one. There's already an investigation into how in the world a hole got blown in the middle of a plane in midair, right? This sort of terrifying moment. This is actually into Boeing as a company, right? It's a broader investigation. Explain that piece of it.
That's right. So the NTSB is in charge of the investigation into how and why that Alaska Airlines plane last Friday night suddenly had this explosive decompression explosion, and that forced out the door plug that we've been talking about. This investigation announced today is from the FAA, really looking at Boeing and how in the world did it manufacture and push out that door plug and that plane, which seemed to have a fatal flaw. And the language the FAA uses here is critical. Let me read it to you. This is an investigation to determine if Boeing failed to ensure completed products conform to its approved design and were in a condition for safe operation and compliance with FAA regs. They go on to say that Boeing's manufacturing practices need to comply with the highest safety standards they are legally accountable to meet. So that's the FAA that now wants answers. How and why did Boeing actually push out this piece of equipment, the plane itself, that would appear to have this fatal safety flaw? For its part, Boeing is promising that it will be 100% transparent as it cooperates with both the NTSB and the FAA. But listen, the FAA is also under pressure because the FAA was supposed to have inspectors, investigators in the Boeing manufacturing facility watching very closely the whole process. Where were they and how did they miss it? That's an open question right now.
Tom Costello, lots of moving pieces yet again today on this issue. Thank you very much.
You bet.
There's a lot of moving pieces, too, as it relates to the potential bomb cyclone, as they call it, this huge weather system that's about to hammer this country at a moment when we have already been hammered by bad weather. We're talking about this atmospheric pressure that's going to drop really quick, intensify these storms really fast. Means blizzard conditions, maybe floods to the eastern half of the country through the weekend, maybe big hail. That means the potential for rivers rising beyond their banks, and then, of course, tornadoes across the south. If you're like, wait a second, this is deja vu, that's because it is. This is the damage that some people down south have already had to deal with this week, with dozens of deadly tornadoes there. And in an update to a story that we brought you last night, sheriffs are identifying the victim of an avalanche at a popular ski resort in Lake Tahoe, 66-year-old Kenneth Kidd. Remember, there was that snowpack, that snowfall. When skiers started going down the mountain, there was an avalanche that, of course, killed Kidd. There was a rescue push, and as that wrapped up today, Maggie Vespa is sitting down with one of the survivors in just the last couple of hours. Listen.
At that particular moment, I felt some slough come by me, and it's not an avalanche, but it's some snow that's kind of blowing by you. Nothing really to worry about. And then 5 seconds later, that's when the avalanche hit me. It swept me off my feet, threw me onto my back.
Ugh, it is just terrifying to hear about. You're going to be able to catch more of that conversation on Nightly News with Lester Holt. That's coming up at 6:30 Eastern, wherever you watch your local NBC station. Bill Cairns is joining us now, our meteorologist. Bill, we talked about that avalanche, and now you hear from somebody who survived it. It gives you chills.
Yeah, so scary to be having the snow. You're helpless, and you just don't know how deep you're going to be buried. I mean, will you be lucky and stay on the surface? I mean, it's just as scary as it gets for anyone that's ever been skiing. It's not something you think about often, but you have to be prepared. So this storm system is really going to start going tonight. We're going to start getting severe storms after midnight. The snow is beginning to break out, and this storm is going to rapidly ramp up, and the winds are going to crank. We already have blizzard warnings that are up for all of almost Iowa, and we have winter storm warnings in Chicago now, up to Milwaukee. Those are some of the big cities that will get hit the hardest, along with areas around Omaha. And someone's going to get 12 to 18 inches somewhere near the Illinois and southern portions of Wisconsin. In Iowa, areas like Des Moines are going to pick up probably 6 to 10 inches of snow, but you're not going to be able to measure it. I mean, we're going to have 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts just blowing this stuff all over the place. It's going to be a mess. And then the severe weather-wise, this is tonight, or areas around the Arklatex area. I think Dallas, you're pretty much safe. Most of the storms should be east of you. These will sweep through Louisiana during the middle of the night, and then tomorrow morning we'll wake up to them in Mississippi, and then we'll take them right through the south all day tomorrow. We should not have a tornado outbreak like last time. They should be more isolated tornadoes, but it only takes 1 or 2 to make a really bad scene. And the areas the greatest chance of a tornado is shown here in the red. And then the flooding on top of this, Hallie. I mean, this is rivers are already full. We're going to get 1 to 2 inches of rain Friday night into Saturday morning, and so additional flooding there. And then behind it we get the cold outbreak, and then Hallie, you mentioned it yesterday. There's even a chance of more snow on the I-95 corridor Tuesday, but we'll have plenty of time to talk about that.
Pump the brakes for just a sec. Let's get through the weekend first,
yes.
And then we'll hit that on Monday. Bill Cairns, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Right. Of course, the nexus of what Bill does with the nexus of what I do as a senior Washington correspondent is coming to a head because Iowa, where we're going to see the caucuses on Monday night, it could be the coldest caucus night there on record. That is not stopping, of course, any of the candidates, as you might imagine, the 3 that you see, from getting out there, from delivering those campaign speeches. Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley. With Haley and DeSantis kind of picking up where they left off at the debate last night, throwing some jabs at each other. Listen.
It was me versus Nikki, I'm sorry.
DeSantisLies.com. I finally just put it on a website because I'm like, it's too many things.
Question is, what is up with the race for second there? As you see some new polling out showing that Nikki Haley may be pulling ahead of Ron DeSantis. But look at Donald Trump. He is still there on top, at least in this most recent snapshot, by double digits. That is a key dynamic to remember as we head into Monday night. He, of course, was in court today, not on the campaign trail, although his campaign, according to sources there, seems to think it is somewhat one and the same. Vaughn Hilliard is live for us in Urbandale, Iowa. And what's interesting, Vaughn, I was having a conversation with the source who was talking about closing arguments, right? This is the time when you think there'd be some coverage of that. How are these candidates trying to make that last-minute pitch to some of these caucus goers here? We know how, to some degree, Donald Trump is doing it by essentially saying, I'm getting, indicted. I'm getting the brunt of this sort of legal issue, and I'm fighting for you. Talk through how the other candidates are doing and what the vibe you're getting on the ground is.
Right. Well, look at the map here. First of all, you have Vivek Ramaswamy on the ground, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, crisscrossing the stage with 4 days left here until the Iowa caucus, trying to make that late play to convince as many folks to turn out at their precincts on what is going to be a severely cold Monday night. You know, the problem right now is that from conversations on the ground with voters, but also the polling data suggests that Donald Trump is still in a pretty dominant position here. And actually, last night's viewership is almost reflective of the polling that we've seen in this race. If you compare Donald Trump's town hall on Fox to the viewership on CNN of the debate between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, you're looking at Donald Trump's event having twice the number of viewers. You know, for Donald Trump, he clearly feels comfortable about his position, and the campaign says a win is going to be a win. But if they can, you know, secure a 12% victory, that would break the record of any Republican in an Iowa caucus ever, you know. But for Donald Trump, it's much more than just Iowa, but it's sending a message that he is the dominant figure in this Republican Party today, and potentially, in the case of like Ron DeSantis, if he doesn't come in second, perhaps should consider getting out of the race.
I don't want to blow up your spot too much, but I will say, you know Iowa probably better than anybody at this point who's covered on the ground, because you lived there. You were there in 2016. I don't know if you're sick of talking about Iowa, but I'm going to make you talk about it. As somebody who knows this state well, Vaughn, who I know has, you know, countless contacts there, what is something that you're seeing that you haven't yet talked about on air? In other words, what is something that we are not covering back here in D.C., in New York, elsewhere, that we should be covering and talking about more from your perspective?
That's a big question, Hallie. From my perspective, I think it is the grip that Donald Trump has on the set of facts that the Republican Party, a great share of the Republican Party, is based off of today. And so while Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis were having substantive, you know, policy back and forths last night, that, by and large, is not what I would say the great share of Republican votes are necessarily predicated on. Instead, you know, this is the part for Donald Trump here where it is about much more. It's about a movement. It is about galvanizing, you know, the great American spirit again, these kind of big movement type themes, as opposed to the minutia, though important minutia, of, you know, the age of Social Security, right? So I think that is one of those things that have gone around when talking to voters. When you ask about Donald Trump, it's kind of that big picture and what he symbolizes to them.
Vaughn Hilliard, we're so glad to have you there. Thank you for rolling with that curveball, as you do so well always. I appreciate it. I'll be on the ground there in Iowa with Vaughn and the rest of our team on Monday for some of our special coverage right here on NBC News Now. You can catch that, of course, at 5 o'clock Eastern, however you watch this show. And then right after this show, picking up at 7 o'clock with my colleagues and friends Tom Yamas and Kristen Welker as well. Coming up, a lot more to get to on this show, including a state of emergency tonight in Papua New Guinea with violent riots breaking out in two of the biggest cities in that country. Why officials there are blaming it on an administrative glitch. Plus, Apple losing its spot for just a moment as the world's most valuable company today. We'll tell you who dethroned it. It is the start of a new era in the NFL and the end of one for the New England Patriots, with Bill Belichick and the team mutually agreeing to part ways in corporate speak. In human person speak, it means they're breaking up. But unlike some of the breakups you may have had, this one came with a press conference. Belichick, along with Robert Kraft there, the team's owner, of course, to make an announcement that honestly a lot of people kind of thought would be coming at this point. Belichick was gracious. He said that being in New England exceeded his wildest dreams. He thanked the fans. He spoke a lot. Watch.
So appreciative of the fans for all the support they've given me, my family, and this football team. And it's with just so many fond memories and thoughts that I think about the Patriots, and I'll always be a Patriot. I look forward to coming back here, but at this time, we're gonna move on.
Belichick leaves after going 4-13 this season. That's the worst record of his career, but he's leaving behind overall an all-time great one, right? In the 24 seasons he's had as the coach of the Pats, 296 wins. And as much as it pains me to say it, 6 Super Bowl titles. You got to give credit where it's due. Sam Brock, noted Giants fan, is joining us now. Listen, sure, Belichick is a big deal in the world of football, obviously. I mean, he's one of the most iconic NFL head coaches that's been sort of in the game. He's also kind of this cultural figure, too. I mean, even seeing him not in a hoodie at that news conference today, people are like, oh, that's like a little bit different. I mean, he in some ways transcended just football.
Not just suit and tie, Hallie, but I think those are the most words I've ever heard Bill Belichick string together in any form of press conference ever in the history of Bill Belichick. I also suspect that you and I sort of had the same coming of age when it comes to our sports teams around the same time. Of course, you're a well-noted Eagles fan. I'm a Giants fan. These are the only two teams in the Belichick era that were able to win a Super Bowl against Bill. So obviously, he went on quite a roll. The stats are astounding when you break it down. This man's success over that couple of decades. First of all, 24 seasons you mentioned. Okay, he made the playoffs in 19 of 24 seasons. I believe the number of victories, postseason victories that he had, 44 victories in the postseason, or I should say 44 games, 31 victories, a 31-13 record in the playoffs. That is incredible. As for the hoodies that you referenced, yes, that's Belichick's signature. It was brought up at the press conference today, actually by Robert Kraft, and here's why this is important. He said, I look forward to seeing Bill in a hoodie on another sideline, and I'll root for him as long as it's not against our team, which is to say that Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, believes that Bill Belichick is not done coaching in the NFL.
Where could he go, and who could coach the Pats now?
Great question. So the Pats is an open-ended question, although Gerard Mayo, who is a linebackers coach, considered a young star, emerging young star in the coaching ranks, is considered to be the favorite for that position. As far as Belichick is concerned, though, there are 7 NFL head coaching jobs right now that are vacant, and they vary in terms of, how good the setup is. I would say personally the best is probably the Los Angeles Chargers or the Tennessee Titans. The Chargers have Justin Herbert, potentially a transcendent talent at the quarterback position, though it hasn't been unearthed yet. Anyone else that Belichick has worked with that has a lot of talent at the quarterback position? Tom Brady. So you would think he might want to go there, except it's a West Coast move. All sorts of speculation. Where will he be taken in? He's definitely developed a reputation, so we'll have to see, Hallie.
Well, so you mentioned Tom Brady, and there is this, I think, debate that happens, and it's going to happen for a long time. Was it Belichick that had the magic during that sort of run for the Patriots? Was it Belichick plus Brady, right? Because one of the things that we looked at were the numbers. Winning record when it was Belichick and Brady, not a winning record once it was just Belichick. You can see without Tom Brady, he went 84, 103. With him, 249 to 75. Now, full disclosure, we had one of the NBC analysts on a couple nights ago who was like, I hate this debate. And credit to him, Devin McCourty, love him, right? But he's like, whatever. He's like, I hate this question. But it's still, I think, a super valid question for people who maybe didn't, used to play for the Pats.
Here's why it's insightful. So, yes, he won a lot more with Brady. Brady also allowed the Patriots to have a much better roster based on taking pay cuts at the quarterback position so they could fill out the rest of their roster. He leaves, and there's more emphasis then on the other position that Bill Belichick holds, which was GM, right? In modern NFL terms, usually you have a coach, you got a GM. Bill assumed both of those jobs. He whiffed on so many draft picks. His personnel evaluation was not good by all accounts within the industry, right? He cost them star receivers, dynamic offensive players, and then you're looking at this roster that is essentially devoid of talent. That was part of the problem, is he consolidated too much power. Robert Kraft wouldn't exactly come out and say that today, but he certainly suggested it, and that's likely the reason why, one of them anyway, you're seeing this chapter finally turning.
Do you think people think they accidentally turned on ESPN just now, our viewers, Sam?
I hope that I can just give you one little shade of Adam Schefter, but I don't think anyone's going to confuse me for him anytime soon. But that's very flattering to do. Thank you.
Sam Brock, if you were a Giants fan, man, we'd be besties. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Just that.
Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. And tonight we've got an update on a story we've been telling you about all week. Number 1, just in from the State Department. Officials now say that some U.S. officials will visit Ecuador in the coming weeks as more violence is just tearing through that country, with the government battling drug trafficking gangs. There was a bomb scare in the capital. There was a new nightclub arson that killed at least 2 people and hurt 9 others. And prisoners, according to the prisons agency, are taking more staff members hostage. Just a very difficult situation there. Number 2, the top court in Massachusetts today ruling that it is unconstitutional for people under the age of 21 to be sentenced to life without parole. The court says that people's brains just aren't fully developed when they're that young. Before this ruling, Massachusetts was one of 10 states requiring life sentences without parole for 18 to 20-year-olds convicted of first-degree murder. Number 3, for a brief moment today, Apple was not the most valuable company in the world. Instead, it was Microsoft. That company's gotten a big boost over its investment in AI, while Apple is still struggling with lower demand for things like the iPhone. Still, again, brief moment. Apple back on top now, but still interesting. Number 4, the Meta CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, says he's raising cattle at his Hawaiian ranch on a diet of macadamia nuts and beer. In case you're wondering, some people give animals beer to help their appetites. It's apparently not a super common thing. Zuckerberg now says he is on a mission to create some of the highest quality beef in the world and called this his most delicious project. Number 5, lost cities now found with archaeologists. Look at this. They're mapping a cluster of settlements in the Amazon. Researchers say at least 10,000 farmers used to live there like 2,000 years ago, right around the time of the Roman Empire. Experts say it shows just how many people were living in such a densely populated area and how complicated the society there was in what is now modern-day Ecuador. Out west now to California, where a homelessness crisis is threatening to become an education crisis for public school students who don't have a permanent home. Right now, there are more than 13,000 students in the LA school district experiencing homelessness. That is up 19% from 2022 to 2023. It is, of course, a public issue, but also a deeply personal one for one superintendent who was once experiencing homelessness himself. Stephanie Gosk has been reporting out this story. She is joining us now. Steph, you spoke to that superintendent. You talked to a student who's experiencing homelessness.
Yeah.
Talk us through this issue, right? Because it is a big one and it is a heavy one. So what did they tell you?
Yeah, it's a really important issue. And I spoke with Superintendent Alberto Carvalho. And, you know, one of the things we talked about, Hallie, and you'll understand this, is that we've got all these campaigns going on. We've got a campaign for president going on, and there are no candidates who talk about education. But LA's experience is not that different from many other large cities in this country. They're dealing with a high cost of living, a migrant crisis. Everything's more expensive, and you have more homelessness on the streets of these cities. And, of course, that translates into children who are experiencing homelessness and trying to go to school. And what does that mean? These schools are absorbing these kids. They want to help them. They have to devote a limited amount of resources that they have to helping them and their families. That affects not only these students, but also the entire school system. Now you've got Alberto Carvalho, who is the superintendent of this very important school district, who comes from this personal experience that is really remarkable. When he was a teenager, he was homeless himself. Listen to what he said to me.
Education saved me and made me. You know, I remember sleeping under the bridges of Miami, blocks away from the office that ultimately I occupied as superintendent. I remember the harshness of my mattress then, which was the concrete of the ground, and the stars as the blanket.
This is personal for you.
It's very personal.
What scares him now, Hallie, as he looks around at the landscape that we're in, we're also talking about pandemic learning loss and all of the struggles that school systems are facing. And what he said to me is it looks even more difficult for students to break that cycle of homelessness than it was for him back when he was 18 living under those bridges in Miami.
Talk about then how school districts, maybe in LA, but even beyond just LA, because there's obviously so many districts where this is an issue, what they can do to support these families, what they can do to support these kids.
Well, first, it starts with trying to bring them some stability at home, and that means trying to find them a place to live that is more longer term. Now, the family that I met this 14-year-old girl, Vanessa. They were in a converted hotel room. She was with her 10-year-old brother and her mom, a very cramped space, and it was temporary. They have, since we met them, have moved into something more permanent. So that's important. You try to bring that stability. Also try to help the family invest in some the early school programs, after school programs. But it is also, just as we mentioned earlier, an intention issue. Why aren't people talking about this? Because what happens to these kids, they are kids now, but they will soon be adults. And the adult problems that they will experience if they aren't getting the help that they need now to get their feet on the ground and have successful lives, it becomes even exponentially bigger when they become adults. Hallie.
Such a good point, Stephanie Goss. Thank you so much for bringing us some of these voices, some of these stories. A lot more to get to when we come back, including a big rebuke of the Pope in Africa, what Catholic leaders there are refusing to do. To Colombia now, where the U.S. Embassy in Bogota is warning Americans traveling there not to use dating apps after the suspicious deaths of 8 Americans there. And while the deaths that happened at the end of last year are not believed to be linked to each other, a few of them do involve some of these apps. According to the embassy, criminals are luring people to meet in public places and then assaulting or robbing them. Kathy Park is joining us now. It is a startling warning, Kathy. What else do we know about it?
Hey there, Hallie. Good to be with you. Well, first of all, if you're planning on heading to Colombia, you should probably reconsider it because the State Department has issued a level 3 travel advisory because of the crime in that country. But yeah, there is that alarming and eye-opening warning about dating apps. They're saying that these criminals are luring their victims, meeting them via the dating apps in these public spaces, restaurants, bars, etc. And then they're taking it a step further and assaulting their victims, robbing these victims. And this is happening across the country in all the major cities. These crimes are being reported. But oftentimes, Hallie, these victims are not coming forward and reporting these crimes because they're embarrassed about what happened to them. And they don't want to take the next step and actually prosecute these individuals. So these numbers, these crimes might actually be higher than what's currently being reported right now.
What do people need to do to make sure that they're keeping themselves safe if they do decide to travel, if not to Colombia, really anywhere? I mean, there's some best practices that people can follow no matter where they are, right?
Exactly. So we should note there were no specific apps that were mentioned in the travel alert, the warning that was issued in Colombia by U.S. officials. But we did reach out to the Match Group and also Bumble, some of the bigger dating apps. Right now, we haven't heard back. But U.S. officials, or rather the U.S. Embassy in Colombia, did have a couple of pointers. If you are in the country, first of all, be cautious if you do plan on going on the app. Also, try to meet the individual in a public space. Don't do it in an isolated area. And also if you're in a hotel, an Airbnb, but if you are in an area where you can connect with a concierge or front desk, have some sort of policy in place so that when you have a visitor, you know exactly who that person is and when they are leaving. And also not a bad idea to just let your loved ones, so your family members, your friends, know that you're going on a date after you connect with someone on the app. Let them know exactly where you're going, the time, the location, and the app that's being used. And lastly, Hallie, if you're meeting the individual and your instincts are telling you something is wrong, just go with your gut and just walk away. Hallie?
Always good advice. Kathy Park, thank you. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's some of what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Papua New Guinea, at least 15 people are dead after huge riots happened in the country's 2 biggest cities. It started after hundreds of police officers, soldiers, prison staff, and public servants walked off their jobs because of this pay dispute with the government. The country says people ended up getting pay cuts because of what they describe as an administrative glitch. In Congo, hundreds of people are dead after major flooding from the Congo River. Look at this. You can see like homes almost up to their roofs in water, cars submerged. The river got to the highest level it's been in 6 decades. Tens of thousands of homes have been destroyed. Out of the Vatican, Catholic bishops across Africa are saying today they refuse to follow the Pope's recent decision to let priests give blessings to same-sex couples. That move has created a bunch of conflict between the Pope and conservative churches all around the world. A lot more to get to when we come back. We'll see you in a sec. We have some significant breaking news just into us, as we have learned now that the U.S. and British military have launched strikes against targets in Yemen, areas of Yemen controlled by the Houthis. This is according to 2 U.S. officials. This, of course, comes in the wake of those Houthi rebel strikes on ships in the Red Sea, those strikes on commercial ships that we've been talking about now for weeks. It is, of course, the potential for a big escalation of the growing conflict in the Middle East. We've got team coverage tonight. I want to start with Gabe Gutierrez, who is live for us at the White House. Gabe, what do we know and where does this go?
Oh, well, hi there, Hallie. As you mentioned, 2 sources confirmed to us that the U.S. and British forces have started strikes against Houthi targets inside Yemen. Now, this is an escalation, Hallie. The U.S. had been trying to prevent or had retaliatory strikes against Houthi forces before, but these are the first land-based retaliatory strikes that the U.S. Has undergone. Now, they targeted multiple locations inside Yemen with fighter jets and Tomahawks fired from Navy ships. Now, Hallie, this comes after the White House has repeatedly warned the Houthis over the last several weeks to essentially knock it off. Now, none of these warnings had apparently worked. Today, the Iranian Navy seized an oil tanker off the coast of Oman, raising the stakes here. Of course, the Houthis being backed by Iran, according to the National Security Council here. And the U.S. had been considering targeting these land-based positions for some time now. The U.S. and the U.K. had already responded by shooting down missiles and drones fired by the Houthis. The U.S. Navy recently sank Houthi boats that had fired on commercial ships. Now, today, Secretary of State Blinken was in Cairo, and he said, I don't think the conflict is escalating, but there are danger points, according to the Secretary of State. But again, the breaking news there, Hallie, that 2 U.S. officials confirmed to NBC News that the U.S. and British military have launched strikes against the Houthi militant group inside Yemen for the first time, Hallie.
Raf Sanchez, I want to go to you now, live for us in Israel, in Tel Aviv. And Raf, we have talked now for weeks about the potential for a broader regional escalation, particularly after these attacks by Houthis in the Red Sea. We know there have been more than 24 on commercial ships, commercial tankers. This has been an issue that the U.S. and allies around the world have been trying to get a handle on.
This has been an issue for 2 months, Hallie, and the Houthis, week after week, attack after attack, have been defying the U.S., defying America's allies, and continuing these strikes on commercial ships heading through the Red Sea, through that narrow strait called the Bab el-Mandeb. Around 20% of global trade disrupted by these Houthi attacks, according to the U.S. government. You have ships, rather than going through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal, and into the Mediterranean, are now taking this very long route around the southern coast of Africa. The Houthi attacks have been driving up the cost of shipping, costs which have been passed on to consumers all over the world. And it has become a situation that has become untenable from the perspective of the White House, from the perspective of the British government. You've heard Secretary Blinken, as he's been here in the region over the last week, saying again and again, there will be consequences if these Houthi attacks continue. And they have continued. Just yesterday, according to the U.S. and British militaries, the Houthis launching their largest, most complex attack yet. 18 drones, 3 missiles fired at ships in the Red Sea, despite those warnings from the U.S., from the U.K. These strikes have been very highly telegraphed, Hallie. The Houthis have known they were coming. They have put out warnings of their own, saying that they will respond to any American attacks, and they have options in terms of targets. Commercial ships in the Red Sea, American bases in the region, but also Saudi Arabia, oil facilities there, which they've targeted many, many times in the past. So we're seeing these American and British strikes coming now. The question is, how will the Houthis respond? Hallie.
That is a big question. Raf Sanchez, I'm going to ask you to stand by for a second. So, Keir Simmons, let me go to you on that and on the objective here on this, as well as the ripple effect in the region.
Well, let's say first, Hallie, that this is an escalation. We've talked about the danger of escalation in the region as a result of the Gaza war, and that's what this is. Now, whether it's a major escalation, we wait to see, because we're going to find out in the hours to come. And it may take the night before we know exactly the full extent of this campaign, which is the US and the UK together. There may be some other countries involved, but primarily it's going to be the US and the UK. In terms of the timing, well, the timing is absolutely related to the Gaza war. The Houthis have been saying, as Raf was talking about these attacks they've been carrying out in the Red Sea, they've been saying all this time that they've been doing that in support of of Hamas, actually, not just the Palestinians, in Gaza. They've been openly saying that. So that's the reason why this is happening now. As Raf points out, it is about the risks, the commercial risks to shipping. It is about the fact that we've already had this big challenge with inflation around the world, that could get worse as a result of ships having to divert, things costing more money. We've seen the oil price go up as a result of what's been happening in the Red Sea. So there's all that. That's the reason for the timing. But I think this is going to be controversial too, Hallie, because there are going to be questions about whether it is possible to attack the Houthis in such a way that you eliminate, if not reduce, or reduce, if not eliminate, their capability of attacking ships in the Red Sea. And as Raf rightly said, the Houthis have said that they intend to respond if they are targeted in this way. We are hearing, Hallie, from Reuters that there have been 3 explosions in Sana'a, in the city of Sana'a in Yemen. So that's a picture, or just a small picture of what's taking place there right now. We assume that they are military targets, not civilian targets. I think the US and the UK will have been careful on that, but that won't necessarily mean that they aren't criticised, that there isn't controversy from other parts of the world about this.
Keir, thanks. Our NBC News analyst Hagar Kamali is joining us as well. Hagar, talk to us about how you see this playing out and this issue, of course, of what a Houthi response could look like.
Sure. Well, so this escalation doesn't really surprise me. And as Keir said, it is a type of escalation, but I think Secretary Blinken put it right when he said that it's a danger point. And the reason is because you're going to see these responses from the U.S. and UK. They've been warning about it for a while. And what they're going to try and target is any capability that allows the Houthis to pursue these attacks. So weapons depots, wherever they store their boats, command centers, training centers, things of this kind, not trying to avoid at any cost anything that appears like a civilian target. And so that message, they're going to hit it hard. And the reason they're going to do that is to try and not let this escalate further, to make this something quick and swift, and with a message of, we're going to hit you hard if you try to do this kind of troublemaking in the future. Now, the Houthis are not rational actors. They never have been. They have provoked Saudi Arabia. They invited a massive war into Yemen, leading to one of the worst humanitarian crises in the last 2 decades. And so I would expect them to respond, but I still don't think that it will escalate further than that, because they just won't be able to.
Hagar, thank you so much. We're glad to have your expertise here on the show, on the broadcast. Raf, let me go back to you here with anything that we may hear in the hours to come from the Israelis. What your sense of that may be?
So the Israelis tend to not comment on these regional developments, especially if they have any involvement. At this point, there is no sign of any Israeli involvement. They have signaled that they feel that these Houthi attacks on shipping going unchallenged by the United States is inviting further aggression. The Houthis are Iranian-backed. They're not Iranian-controlled necessarily, but they're part of what the Iranians call the axis of resistance, these ring of groups from Yemen to Iraq to Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, who all in different ways coordinate with Iran. And the Israelis want to see the U.S., want to see the Western countries stepping up, challenging the Houthis, all these members of the Axis of Resistance. We have seen the Houthis firing long-range missiles in the direction of Israel. None of them have actually hit. It's more apparently symbolic, kind of a sign of their solidarity with the people of Gaza, that they've been firing towards the southern city of Eilat, most of those missiles being intercepted by U.S. ships who have been in the Red Sea over these last 2 months. But it's likely that the Israelis will welcome this action. They may even feel that it is overdue. Hallie.
Raf Sanchez, thank you so much for your reporting live for us from Tel Aviv. I want to go to Dan Dulos, our national security correspondent here at NBC News. And Dan, as I think you've heard from our correspondents, our analysts here, this is not altogether unexpected. In other words, this is not a total shock, a total surprise to people who have been watching the way that this has been building. Tell me what you're hearing from your sources and the folks you're talking to about this.
You're right. It's not at all a surprise. And if anything, everyone was expecting this. What's striking is that it's exactly what the administration had hoped to avoid. And I think they felt they just had no choice at this point. They felt they had to send a message. They very much wanted other countries to join in so it wouldn't be a solo effort. So there is this role of the British forces there. There's British warships there, and British fighter jets, no doubt, were probably involved in this operation. They will be trying to target radar sites. They will be trying to weaken or damage the Houthis' ability to disrupt shipping. But the dilemma here, which Keir was talking about, is that this is not so easy to do. They are sending a message right now, but it's pretty difficult to just stop the Houthis from launching drones back into the Red Sea, back into this waterway, and discouraging commercial shipping companies from operating there. So this is not something that can be solved in one step. And I think the Iranian proxies there, the Houthis, have succeeded now in really escalating this whole conflict that's been building and building for weeks and months. And also keep in mind, the U.S. also faces threats in Iraq and Syria. They are also getting rockets and drones attacks there where U.S. forces are stationed. And there have been airstrikes now against those Iranian proxies, those militias. So this is building. This is not over yet. And I think shipping will not be restored to a normal state for some time.
You said something really important there, Dan, right? The issue of what happens with these key shipping lanes, because this is not simply, obviously, a military issue. This is an economic one that affects the global supply chain and could have serious impacts on that, Keir. That is part of the pressure that some of these commercial companies have been feeling and responding to.
Hallie, and I think one of the interesting things to differentiate here is between capability of the Houthis and their intent. So in terms of their capability, again, we're going to find out in the hours to come, and folks like Dan will be bringing us this news, I'm sure, in the hours to come about exactly what the US thinks and the UK thinks it has done, it has been aiming to do. And does it have a strategy it must do to try to damage the Houthis' capability to threaten that shipping lane, that vital shipping lane? In terms of the question of intent, the Houthis have said that they will respond and that they will be enjoying this, but that's a different.
Keir Simmons, thank you so much. Dan Dulos, our thanks to you as well. We're going to have a lot more coverage right here on NBC News Now. Top Story picks it up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.